Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is you're watching this. This is What's Left, and I'm your host, Larry Erickson. And for the next nearly half hour, I'm going to be talking about some things that I hope you'll find interesting enough to pay attention to. If you have any reactions to the show, you can always email them to me directly. This is my personal email, whoviating@aol.com. Or if you didn't catch that, go to my website. It's called Lotus Surviving a Dark Time. The URL will be here a few times during the show, and you can get the email address from there if you didn't run out to get paper and pencil to write it down, or you can leave a comment there if you'd rather. If you do send me email, as always, I have two requests. One is to leave something in the subject line and make it clear it's not spam, and be a little patient about getting an answer because I just stink about answering emails. So with those necessary preliminaries out of the way, let's get to it. I always like to start with some good news, and I have got some this week. It's good news in the form of the fact that the dream of a free higher education for all is one tiny step closer to being a reality. New York State has created and adopted a program offering universal public college tuition at SUNY, which is State University of New York, and CUNY, which is City University of New York campuses. In other words, tuition-free four-year college. Called the Excelsior Scholarship Program, the name drawn from the fact that Excelsior is the state motto of New York. Its only requirements are being a state resident, having a family income of less than $100,000 a year, rising to $125,000 by 2019, and that the recipient be a full-time student maintaining the minimum GPA required for their program. There's no age limit, and there's no limit on the number of citizens who can benefit from this. Now, there are some states that have comprehensive grant and scholarship programs for four-year schools, and free coverage of two-year college does exist in 3 states and is or has been considered by several more, but New York's is the only truly universal four-year program. An estimated 80% of New York families with college-age students could take advantage of the program, along with older students entering the program for the first time. Now, I've seen 2 concerns raised about the program. One being that it requires recipients to stay in the state for the same number of years that they were in the program. But frankly, that kind of requirement is really not that unusual in these kind of grants. The idea being that you've received a benefit of enabling you to obtain these skills in this school, and so now, in exchange for that, you promise to apply those skills locally for a period of time. The bigger, more serious concern raised, though, is that it doesn't go far enough in addressing the needs of low-income residents who often find the costs of things like housing, food, and transportation to be bigger obstacles, sometimes far bigger obstacles than the tuition, which a single example can demonstrate. At a typical SUNY school, tuition is about $6,500 a year. But room and board and fees come to $14,000 a year, and that does not include the cost of books. Even so, even despite those limitations, there is a fair amount of good news here, and that by reducing the cost of college by thousands of dollars a year, this program has brought college into the reach of at least a decent number of working and middle-class families who could not have afforded it before. And it is at the very least a recognition of the principle that higher education should not be a privilege of the wealthiest, nor should it be a conduit to lifelong debt. The Excelsior Scholarship is far from perfect, but it is a clear step in the right direction, and that makes it good news. And as a quick footnote to that, you may have noticed a familiar figure on the stage in that picture that I had up, and yes, that was Bernie Sanders, joining New York Governor Andrew Cuomo at a press conference in January to announce the Excelsior Scholarship Program, which I mention here because on April 3rd, Sanders and Representative Pramila Jayapal introduced the College for All Act into the Congress. The act would eliminate tuition and fees at four-year public colleges, and it would do this for families making up to $100,000 a year, which is about 80% of the population. It would make community college tuition and fee-free for all people, as well as offering debt relief to students, expanding existing federal aid to cover all the costs of college, not just tuition, and addressing the needs of the poorest residents. In his press release, Sanders noted that the entire cost of this program could be raised by a small tax on forms of Wall Street speculation. Next up, one of our regular features, this is the Clown Award, given as always for meritorious stupidity. And this week we had enough nominees that I think of it as a cavalcade of clowns leading up to our winner. I thought actually initially of going for the obvious this week and giving the Clown Award to presidential mouthpiece and Melissa McCarthy impersonator Sean Spicer for his observation that Hitler never used gas on his own people. But, you know, everybody got him for that, and I wanted to use something that's not quite as well known. Next possibility was another one that, you may have heard about this one too. So, In Style magazine used a picture of Amy Schumer in a one-piece swimsuit on its May cover. Swimsuit designer Dana Duggan took offense at this and tweeted, quoting, "You could not find anyone better for this cover? Not everyone should wear a bathing suit." Now, after she got major flack for that trash, she ran behind the "it's my freedom of speech" defense. But yeah, Ms. Duggan, the thing is, people like you always forget you have freedom of speech. So do we. So, quit your whining. What makes this especially clownish, though, is that Duggan, who admits she does not use plus-size models in her work, said Schumer should not be on the cover, should not be in a swimsuit, that it's a matter of beauty, and that she's, quoting, "tired of the media and publications trying to push the fat agenda," with the word fat in all caps, an agenda which is not pretty and not healthy, all the while insisting she wasn't fat-shaming anybody. Yeah, well, Dana Duggan, I have to tell you, I am not a particular fan of Amy Schumer, but at least any fat she may have is spread over her whole body, unlike yours, which is all in your head. All right, our next candidate was Jeffrey Lord, a frequent commentator on CNN. Apparently, the Rump told the Wall Street Journal this week that he was considering cutting funding for subsidies that help cover deductible and co-pays for low-income people under the Affordable Health Care Act, so-called Obamacare. The idea here is that cutting these subsidies would threaten the viability of the entire system of the whole insurance structure of the ACHA, and so would force Democrats to negotiate on repealing the whole act. In other words, he is threatening to destroy whatever good has come out of the Affordable Health Care Act in order to force Democrats to cooperate in destroying whatever good has come out of the Affordable Health Care Act. Amid a discussion of health care legislation on CNN, that plan, according to Jeffrey Lord, makes Donald Trump the Martin Luther King of health care. Sometimes the clownishness does not even need to be explained. All right, well, here's a good possibility. Valerie Codon, an elder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, gave a speech at the church's biannual general conference, that was the first weekend in April, in which she declared that your promise to tithe, that is to give 10% of your income to the church, outweighs all other obligations, even to the point of having your children go hungry. Now, of course, Jesus declared, "Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven," told the rich man that to be sure of salvation, he should follow the commandments and go and sell what you have and give to the poor, and also said, "It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to pass through the gates of heaven." But when your church is making an estimated $7 billion a year by tithing, who's going to let a few hungry kids stand in the way? But even he could not match the combination of inanity and venality of our winner. So this week, the winner of the Big Red Nose is a Georgia-based preacher named Kenneth Adkins. Now, it has been not quite a year since Omar Mateen shot up the LGBTQ-oriented Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, killing 49 people and wounding 53 others in the biggest mass shooting in U.S. history. In response to the attack on the nightclub, Adkins tweeted, quoting, "Dear gays, go sit down somewhere. I know you want some special attention," but he said, "You are sinners who need Jesus." He came back later to say that such victims got what they deserve. What's more, in 2014, Adkins had helped lead a fight against expanding Jacksonville's anti-discrimination ordinance to cover LGBTQ people. In doing so, he actually portrayed black church leaders who supported expanding the law as slaves being sold on an auction. And he also, of course, is opposed to transgender rights because of the sexual predators in the bathroom nonsense. The latter of which is related to why he gets the award, because sexual predation is apparently something he was familiar with. On April 10th, Kenneth Adkins was convicted in Brunswick, Georgia, of 8 counts of sexually molesting a minor. 2 counts of aggravated child molestation, 5 counts of child molestation, and 1 count of enticing a child. The jury just took an hour to reach his verdict. He could spend decades in prison. Thus is demonstrated the principle of karma. And I would add that it is, if you will, an act of Christian forbearance, that all I'm calling it is and in fact, if you have any doubts about this, if you have any doubts about him being included in the Clown Award, consider that at one point during that battle over expanding Jacksonville's civil rights ordinance, a battle which, by the way, was won by the good side, and at one point in that, Adkins dressed in drag and said on Facebook, quoting, "I am going to pee next to your women in the women's bathroom and let's see how you feel." Apparently, it feels blissfully unaware that women's bathrooms do not have urinals. And bro, your women have undoubtedly already shared a bathroom with a transgender woman and just never actually knew it. Call him a bigot, call him a hypocrite, call him a predator. None of that changes the fact that Kenneth Adkins is a clown. All right, next up, one of our occasional features. This is called The Little Thing, and it's where something in an article that doesn't really get the attention that I think it deserves, something that's sort of mentioned in passing, but that doesn't really seem to draw any attention, but which I think is significant. All right, well, this came in a report on the arrest of a Russian programmer suspected of large-scale hacking and installing malicious viruses on hundreds of thousands of computers. Much of Pyotr Levashov's alleged activity involved ransomware. These are viruses that block access to your computer or to some parts of your computer and demand a ransom be paid in order to free it up, a freeing up which generally doesn't happen even if the ransom's paid. Despite the claim of his wife Maria that his arrest had to do with a computer virus he created that was related to Trump's win, quote unquote, the arrest more likely had to do with going after Russian cyber criminals who have been helping the Russian government in its own cyberwar programs, which have included, it is alleged, cyber attacks on Russia's neighbors. And this is where the little thing comes in. It was a quote comment in the middle of the article with no mention of its meaning, no mention of its impact, no reference back to it. It comes from Milan Patel. He's the managing director of a cybersecurity firm called K2 Intelligence, and in fact was a former chief technology officer at the FBI's cyber division. He said, and I'm quoting, "We've reached a boiling point with Russia. They are the closest competitor to the U.S. when it comes to cyber espionage and cyber attacks. With Russia now, a lot is coming to the forefront and being made public about how they run their cyber activities." Okay, wait, stop. They are the closest competitor to the U.S.? Doesn't that mean the U.S. is ahead of them? Doesn't that actually mean that the U.S. is the world's leader in when it comes to cyber espionage and cyber attacks? Just another reminder, in fact, that the NSA has an entire bureau dedicated to enabling the agency to hack any computer system in the world, anywhere, anytime, operating under the slogan of, and this is actual, getting the ungettable. What's the line about people in glass houses? Let's take a break. And here we are back again. All right, next up is one of our, well, it's intended to be occasional feature, but it seems to be becoming more regular. It's called For the Record. And that's where we mention some things very quickly, just a couple of sentences, because just want to make sure they got mentioned. And these actually are ones that are mostly from a week or two ago, but they're worth mentioning before they slip too far into the rearview mirror. So, For the Record. An article about the far right-wing organizations Club for Growth and Heritage Action attacking some goppers for not being sufficiently reactionary with regard to healthcare legislation. The article quoted David McIntosh, president of Club for Growth, as referring to, quote, the left wing among House Republicans, which is now my new example for the word oxymoron. Next up, For the Record, Daesh, that is ISIS, released its first statement directly referencing Donald the Rump earlier this month, declaring that the U.S. is being run by an idiot, which just made me think, what's the old saying about if it's the truth, what does it matter who said it? Next up, For the Record, German skincare company Nivea got itself into trouble recently by posting an ad pushing the phrase, white is purity. The company pulled the ad in the face of the reaction, saying it was not meant to be racially insensitive, which would be easier to accept if in 2011 the company hadn't put up this ad featuring a black man being urged to re-civilize yourself. Sometimes the excuse of not thinking it through just isn't good enough. All right, last up here, For the Record. This is a few weeks ago, but still worth mentioning. For the Record, David Daleiden and Sandra Merritt, the pair behind those bogus, deceitfully edited videos falsely claiming that Planned Parenthood was profiting by selling body parts of aborted fetuses, they've been charged in California with 15 felonies related to their illegal recordings. They had previously been indicted in Texas, but those charges actually were dropped, it turns out, on a legal technicality. As a quick reminder, officials in 13 states investigated the claims made in the videos. None of them found any wrongdoing by Planned Parenthood. Officials in 8 other states took a look and decided it wasn't even worth investigating. All right, now, our next it's one of our other regular features. This is the Outrage of the Week. This week it's going to be a bit different because it's not about a single issue, a single law, a single event. It's rather a broader question of part of what, for a lack of a better term, I'll call our national ethos. On April 13th in Afghanistan, the U.S. dropped the largest non-nuclear bomb ever used in combat, a 22,000-pound device known as the GBU-43 Massive Ordnance Air Blast, or MOAB, a name which some people have described as standing for Mother of All Bombs. It's 10 times the size of the largest generally used bombs in the U.S. arsenal and has a yield of 11 tons. Asked if he authorized the use of the bombs, the Rump said, quote, everybody knows exactly what happened. What I do is authorize my military. We have given them total authorization, and that's what they're doing, and frankly, that's why they've been so successful lately. Now, some people, especially on the establishment Democratic Party-linked left, jumped on his use of the word my, claiming he was acting like, as one put it, a dictator or boy king. But in so doing, they missed the real point, which was the statement, we have given them total authorization, which if it means anything, it means I have told the military to do whatever they damn please and don't bother me with details. The so-called MOAB, so-called mother of all bombs, provides actually a clear example of this. Why use it? Beyond insisting it was the right weapon, the Pentagon won't say. What did it accomplish? Beyond claiming it killed 36 militants, they won't say that either. They claim the target was tunnels and caves used by Daesh in northern Afghanistan near the border with Pakistan. But they also claim, the Pentagon also claims that over recent months, Daesh has lost well over half its fighters and 2/3 of its territory that it controlled in Afghanistan. And in fact, Daesh is in Afghanistan a minor player compared to the Taliban. So why use your biggest bomb, your biggest weapon, on your weakest opponent? More to the point, the Moab, the GPU-43, is not a ground penetrator. It is not designed to target tunnels and caves. It's clearly not the right weapon, which is especially true because we have ground penetrating bombs in our arsenal. So why use it? Because they could. Because they had an open area they could drop it on. Remember, this bomb had never before been used in combat. And what's the point of having a toy if you can't play with it? That's what we're seeing. We're seeing the military being told to do what it wants. That's why Army General John Nicholson, commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, could casually tell the Senate Armed Services Committee in February that he needs a few thousand more coalition troops in Afghanistan, while allowing us how he supposed he could make do with about 30,000, which is 2.5 times the number that are there now. That's why the rump is witnessed, and note I say witnessed, not directed, not authorized, just witnessed, a drone strike just about every day he has been in office, a rate 5 times that of Barack Obama, who was often and rightly condemned for his drone war on mostly Muslim nations. That's why in Iraq, where despite the lies around it, we have had boots on the ground, or I should say boots back on the ground for some time. That's why in Iraq, the U.S. has streamlined the process for calling in airstrikes. Strikes that as Iraq and other forces get closer to Mosul, strikes that have actually killed an increasing number of non-combatants. In fact, so many more that casualties in March, civilian casualties in March, broke records for a month. And so much so that concerns have been raised by international human rights groups, including Amnesty International, that the U.S. forces may be acting with unprecedented disregard for civilian casualties. That's why in Syria, U.S. personnel have expanded their footprint, including a detachment of Marine artillerymen and a contingent of U.S. Army Rangers going to Syria in March. That's where the U.S. Air Force has expanded an air base in northern Syria, which is intended to play a major role in the coming attack on Raqqa, which is the self-proclaimed capital of Daesh's Islamic State. And that Raqqa, in fact, has already become another target, seeing increased civilian casualties. What we are seeing here is the expansion, the unleashing of militarism. We are not seeing despite what some people have said, we are not seeing the Rumpian military policy, except to the extent that that policy consists of giving the military a free, or at least increasingly free hand. And like a horse given its head that may not take off at a full gallop, but will build up to it anyway, we can and should anticipate as the result of this non-policy policy, more airstrikes, more boots on the ground, more drone strikes, more death, more blood, more civilians, more non-combatants killed, more homes destroyed, more refugees, and more attempts to keep it just beyond our awareness, just beyond our field of vision, just beyond the reach of our outrage. And that in turn is why the Pentagon will now no longer disclose how many U.S. military personnel are on the ground in Iraq and Syria, and why the rump has returned authority to direct drone strikes to the CIA, because all of these allow increased secrecy, the better to keep the carnage hidden from our eyes. It was said a few decades ago, around the start of the first Gulf War, that Americans would not resist to military adventures so long as the number of American casualties was low. And at the time, this was thought a horrible moral judgment on the American people that could not possibly be true. But in fact, history has shown otherwise, shown that it is true, and now this is a basic part of Pentagon strategy. Even so, there's always the chance that our national conscience could be awakened. In fact, the way the attack on the civilian attack on civilians in Mosul breached the headlines was proof of that. So it's even better that they would want to keep even the number of soldiers involved hidden behind a PR smokescreen. And at this point, it is important. It is important to say that no, do not fall for the partisan line that this all has to do with the rump, that this is all because of him, all his doing. The issue, again, is not the rump, it is militarism. This goes back far before him. In fact, we don't have to go back any further than the previous administration. Remember that Barack Obama came into office on the wings of optimism and hope and yes, we can, and promises to end wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He left office with boots on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria, a legacy of an illegal war in Libya, the expansion of the militaristic surveillance state, and having bombed more countries than George Bush did. The U.S., the Obama administration, dropped over 23,000 bombs on 6 nations in 2015 and over 26,000 bombs on 7 nations in 2016. Totals which in fact are undoubtedly low because they count strikes, and strikes can include more than one weapon. And yet at the same time, it is not unfair to say that Obama was at least to some extent trying to hold the reins, trying to exert some counterforce, that he was refusing to just turn the military loose. But he faced the same enemy that multiple presidents have faced, the same entrenched, and it's become a cliche because that's only because it's so true, the same entrenched military-industrial complex with an appetite for arms and an aptitude for aggression. So no, this militarism is not something that's new with the rump. It's not his creation and not his doing. What is different now, and why this is so threatening now, is that he is either embracing it or prepared simply to stand by and let it happen. And the potential consequences that presents for unknown people, unknown numbers of people around the world, that truly is a moral outrage. And that's it. We're done for this week. There's actually more to talk about this in terms of our reaction to it. When they attacked the Syrian airfield, a media watchdog group called FAIR actually found over 80 editorials and op-eds about that attack. Only one of them objected. Only one of them was against it. So there's still a lot of questions about how we as a nation react to this kind of thing. So there's more about this. But for now, that's it. I got to get out of here. I'm out of time. So for you, we will see you again next week. And in the meantime, you just have, as always, the best week you possibly can. And peace.